And welcome back to Open Your Eyes. We're about to jump on into our first topic of the morning, the Belize Agricultural Health Authority, BAHA, and the medfly detection. It has been something that nearly every year we find something. Something is always out there. As a matter of fact, we've got the professionals in to tell us about it. Hernan Zetina, who is the Deputy Plant Health at BAHA. I'd like to wish you a very pleasant morning. And also Margarito Garcia, Technical Director of Quarantine Department there at BAHA as well. Guys, good morning. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
We trust that you had a good morning so far.
It was hot but nice.
Any fruits since the morning start?
Not yet. Not yet.
Yeah. You know, during the commercial break, actually, we spoke about some of the stuff that we are looking forward to. Medfly. You know, we hear about a medfly, but we don't know what it is. Yeah. Is it a disease? Is it something living? What is medfly?
It is an insect. It's a pest that causes a lot of problems for countries that do not have it. Mm-hmm. So just to give a little bit of history, the Mediterranean fruit fly, or medfly as it's commonly known, as the name suggests, was first reported in the 18th century in the Mediterranean areas. On the island of Mauritius was the first report. However, it wasn't until 1905 that it appeared on the American continent in Brazil, and since that time it has been moving north. The first time we found medfly in Belize was in 1987. At that time, the United States Department of Agriculture were doing trapping, but they were only interested in presence or absence of the pest because they didn't want it to move north into Mexico and eventually into the US. However, when we found the first detection, then we had an eradication program and we were able to eradicate the medfly. Again in 1989, we found it again, and so Belize sought assistance through the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, to set up a systematic surveillance program, which we have in place since 1989. Now, the medfly has never become established in Belize. Although we have sporadic introductions, it has never become established. We've been able to keep it out of Belize.
I just wanted to ask you to explain that a bit further, because when you say detection versus established, what does that mean?
Established means that it has that you have a population that is constantly breeding and you cannot get rid of it.
So it lives here.
It lives here, right? And eventually it becomes, established in Belize. For example, it has become established in Guatemala, Honduras, all the Central American countries. Belize is the only country in Central America, in the region, that is entirely free of this pest.
You know, I definitely want to say kudos to that. But why do you feel that these countries, it have become established in these countries?
Yeah, it's a dynamics. For example, in Guatemala, the primary host is coffee. And here in Belize,
and it is a fruit.
It is the coffee berry, but the coffee berry, when it's ripe, it's a fruit, and so it's the primary host for medfly in Guatemala. Now, producers of coffee are not interested in the berry; they're interested in the actual seed that they roast. So they have no interest to control medfly, and so that's the reason why it's so difficult for people in Guatemala to control it. And another issue that they have is the social issue. The indigenous people do not allow them to probably go in and set traps in their area. They need to get permissions from the caciques and the person in charge. In fact, they've actually kidnapped people. So, setting up traps, they have actually kidnapped them to show that they're displeasure. Right, exactly. And so the dynamics in Guatemala is different than Belize. For us here, we have the advantage that people are aware of the program, and so when we go and say we need to spray or we need to strip your fruit, although people are not that happy, they still allow us to do it.
And that's what I wanted to ask. How have we been able to put controls in place to not have the medfly established in Belize when it's everywhere else around us? What have we been doing?
Right, and this is where quarantine comes in.
Well, actually, as a result of the medfly threats, the Quarantine and Inspection Service was created. That was in 1981, when medfly hit the state of Florida and Belize. The citrus producers were concerned. Then government decided to open the first quarantine office at the airport back then, now the Shirley Bolson International Airport. As a result of that, the other quarantine stations opened at all the official points of entry. And Since then, quarantine inspection service became the first line of defense. It started due to medfly, but because we have a vibrant agricultural sector, we have to try to delay entry of pests and diseases that can affect agricultural health and human health as well. We also deal with food safety.
Yeah.
But as my colleague was saying, medfly is a threat for our fresh produce. One, because it can stop trade automatically.
Yeah.
And these detections that we have in the south currently, we have to move fast to eradicate it, to avoid putting quarantine in the area. Because if we establish quarantine of the area, then no fruits, nothing will be able to come out from there.
Yeah.
So what we are asking the general public is for cooperation to help us by not moving any fruit from the areas that are infested right now, which is an area in Hopkins. We have in Dump and in the Placencia area.
So that's Dump, Toledo,
Zapadilla,
Placencia, Hopkins.
Yes.
And the Zapadilla
And
Keys.
Zapadilla
And
Keys,
Zapadilla
yeah.
Keys.
The Zapadilla Keys, we're not that worried right now because it's very far, and a lot of people don't go to the Zapadilla Keys.
Yeah.
It's 45 miles from Punta Gorda in a easterly direction.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a
You
rough
east
ride.
45 miles. It's like an hour and a half by boat.
Yeah.
All right, so
But let me, one
Okay,
second
sure.
though, because what I wanted to be sure to clarify, what I hear from you is that you're at the first phase, which is voluntary quarantine. Don't move your fruits
Right.
out of this area, please.
Right.
And unless you start to see an increase in the medfly, then you'll have to move to a mandatory quarantine.
Right.
So in order for people to buy into this type of voluntary action, it's important that they know the impact it can
Right.
have. What are the concerns about medfly, specifically to farmers and even to the wider population?
Yeah. Well, the biggest concern is the trade impact.
Yeah.
Countries that have medflies are not able to trade with countries that do not have. Our biggest importer is the US for fresh fruits.
Yeah.
So we're exporting fresh papayas right now. So if the medfly was to appear in an area that is producing papaya, then that market would be immediately closed. Now, if the medfly was to become established, for example, in the south, then the citrus industry would suffer from production losses. So it's been estimated that they could lose up to 25 to 30% in production. And we already have low production because of HLB,
Yeah.
so this will only compound the problem.
And that's because the medfly uses the fruit itself, the citrus fruits.
Right, the fresh fruit, it lays its egg in the fruit, and then it turns into a larvae or worm. So and that's the way that it spread. The medfly on its own will not move as long as it has food.
Yeah.
But people get an infested fruit. They don't know. You bite into a mango, a guava, a pear, and you see a
hole.
A worm.
Right, a larva, a worm. You take it and you throw it by the roadside. So most of the time, I'd say 95% of the time, whenever we have detections, it's right by the highway or by the roadside.
that's where we detect.
Yes.
So it's when it comes to this, because just looking at it, it's a scary look. It's a
Yeah.
scary thought.
Yeah.
Now, is it dangerous to consume? What happens if you should consume?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's like if you're eating into a guava and you don't know that a worm is in there, you'll ingest it, but it won't do absolutely nothing. There's no harm to humans by eating a fruit that is infested with
Margarito,
the larvae.
tell me, how do you detect the source
Yes.
of where the medfly came from? Because the areas that you're talking about, Zapadilla Keys, they can
Placencia,
travel by
yes.
boat.
Yes.
Placencia the same, Hopkins the same, and then Dump, clearly we have a very active crossing with Guatemala on that side.
Yes. Well, we know for sure that Honduras and Guatemala have the medfly.
Yeah.
And also we have illegal movement of people from Honduras, from Guatemala. We have some porous areas, where they can come in. Even at the Halacte, if they slip through the checkpoint with a fruit that is infested or has the larvae or the worm, it can easily be introduced into the country. We have buses moving from down south up to even Hopkins, Placencia, every day.
Yeah.
And people may bring a fruit that has the fly larvae. And this is how like what my colleague was saying, if a fruit, you cut it and it has a larvae, you dump it on the roadside, and that's where you have an outbreak. And we believe that this is the way humans traveling are bringing these fruits and throwing it away, and that's how we have these detections in these locations. So it's important for the general public to know this, how this pest can come into Belize. So to help us, help our country, because our farmers, our exporters of fresh fruits need everybody's support so that we can prevent this pest from coming in. And we have to prevent it, eradicate it as soon as, and this is where we are right now, implementing eradication measures to avoid putting the entire area into quarantine.
So you said there is a quarantine check by Halakte.
Yes, we have we call it an agricultural control point. It's a control where we don't regulate imports because it's not an official border, but there's a lot of movement since the opening of the highway.
Yes.
And we have buses, we have excursions, people going there, coming with goods from Guatemala.
And it's not an official border crossing, so you're not filling out a customs form or anything like that. So how do you ensure, because we're not just talking about medfly, there's so many other agricultural diseases that we are trying to prevent from coming into Belize.
Exactly. So our officers there really are there to inspect everything that's coming in. For fruits, meats, live animals, other agricultural commodities that can bring in a pest or a disease. We know, for example, we are aware of the early mortality syndrome in shrimps. This is through Honduras, Guatemala is an easy pathway as well to bring in a disease, a new disease in shrimps or whatever. Or we hear about avian influenza, Newcastle diseases. These are all endemic in these countries, which they do vaccination, but it can easily be introduced to live animals. Many other pests and diseases can be introduced in this way. So it was very important for us to have that control point there to monitor and try to prevent or delay as much as possible the entry of any pest or disease that can affect Belize.
And to show the impact that this station has had, in 2013 when we had the largest outbreak of medflies, again coincidentally in Hopkins, since then the incidents have decreased almost, exponentially. In 2013, the amount of flies detected are almost 1,000.
Wow.
Since then, it has decreased. Last year, in 2016, we had 13 detections for the year. Then last year, we had 11.
And the current detection?
The current detection so far we had for this year about 9.
So I was incorrect. It's not that it's people going out in boats who are bringing the items over. It's perhaps that they're coming through the illegal border point with Guatemala.
But you also have to take into consideration that there's a lot of migrant workers who work in the south, in the banana industry, citrus industry. These are temporary workers from Central America. And now in the construction industry along the Placencia Peninsula. There's a lot of migrant workers, and these people come, work for a couple of months, go back home, then return, or some of them return on every week or every 2 weeks. And when they return, they might bring fruits that are not readily available in Belize, such as like peaches, pears, that are medfly hosts, and inadvertently they introduce the fly into Belize. So we haven't done any scientific research to see where the real source or the cause is. But these are the theories that we have. So we believe it's either migrant workers or people who are bringing in fruits and vegetables that are medfly hosts illegally.
So let's look at some of the fruits, or at least name some of the fruits that are right here in our country that people can look out for and say, this might be, that might be.
Most of the fresh fruits here in Belize are medfly hosts.
Oranges,
really,
bananas,
not bananas, but more oranges, mango, guava. And like I say, here in Belize, almonds, tropical almonds, or hamans, as it's commonly known, is the preferred host. Luckily, people don't really eat it. Some people might, sometimes out of curiosity, they might move the fruit, but it's not normally moved.
Oh wow!
So
your current detection is in three
areas.
3 fruits so far.
Right, 3 areas we have in Zapadilla Keys. We found one male medfly in dump, which is just considered a detection. For it to be considered an outbreak, it has to be multiple flies or a single gravid or copulated female. So in Hopkins, we've had 4 detections last week, and so it's considered an outbreak. So what we did was we went in and we removed the fruits from the detection area, and we began putting in additional traps, and we began doing spraying. And the chemicals that we're using is an approved organic pesticide. So
I was gonna go
yeah,
there.
we're not using the hard stuff like malathion again. So
And so you said sea grapes, cocoa plum,
cocoa
mangoes,
plum, mango,
or
guava, orange,
And Mr.
Yeah,
Hammonds.
We've
and,
not
and
had.
Hammonds. Right.
Have you had any detection in citrus fruits? This year?
No.
Okay, 'cause that would be a major concern.
Right, not recently, not
Okay.
recently. And we do have a protocol with the citrus industry that if we find in a commercial grove, that we have a way to get the fruits to the factory, immediately process it. Since we don't export fresh fruits, they process it, and then the refuse we destroy, we bury.
So let me be clear, because when you talk about going in and treating, trapping,
Right.
and then using pesticide, there's a clear difference between when you have to go into a commercial farm, because that's loss of money,
Right.
versus your backyard mango tree or the sea grapes that's just in your yard. What's the communication like when you go in? Are people open to having you trap and properly treat the plant?
Most people, I'd say 99.9% of the persons have absolutely no problem with us putting traps.
Okay.
And if we go and speak to them, for example, we were in Hopkins on Friday, and the area that we found the fly was on a mango, the blue mango, which is considered a nice variety.
One of the favorites,
and the lady wasn't too happy, but she quickly said, you know what, you do what you need to do. I understand the importance, and so they allowed us to remove the mangoes.
So what happens there? You take off all the mangoes off that particular tree?
That particular tree, and we have a 250 meter radius that we remove all the fruits that are potential.
All the fruits from the tree?
Yes.
My goodness.
And that's the reason right now that we're not doing the mandatory quarantine. We're allowing the control that we have in place to take its course, and we're hoping that we don't have to, that will take care of and contain the fly in that area. But we're asking people, if you want to use your mango, you use it in the village. But we're also aware that people depend on some of the fruits as their livelihood. They want to take it to the market. So we're doing everything that we can right now in the immediate area to ensure that if people do move mango, that the risk of them moving an infested fruit is very minimal.
How do you detect the medfly? I mean, it's an insect.
Yes,
on a specific tree,
looks like a Dr. Fly to me.
We have a trapping program, and the surveillance program. The traps have a pheromone that attracts the male. So whenever the males want, they get together and they form what we call a lek. And they emit a certain pheromone. And so they have synthetically produced this pheromone, and so that's what we use in the trap. So the males go to the trap thinking that they're forming lek to mate.
Yes.
Right, and then there's a sticky part in the trap that captures the
so it's a little
medfly.
white
And
thing.
so our guys go on a weekly basis and check the trap. And that's the surveillance and timely detection of the medfly is the core part of our program. And that's why we've been so successful.
That does sound clearly it's been effective if you're monitoring consistently on whether or not it's in the country.
It's an expensive venture. It costs us about almost $400,000, $500,000 a year to run this program. But
because you have to go back and check.
Yes.
Every week we go, and it's we even in the Zapadilla Keys now we're doing once a month because of the distance and the cost, but we're doing preventative control out in the Zapadilla Keys. So whenever we go out, we spray. Even if there's no medfly, we spray just in the event that that they reach there. And then we have what we call some stationary baits, which are kill stations. So it's a trap, but not for surveillance purposes, not to detect.
So if it catches
strictly,
it,
it's
strictly
strictly to kill.
Okay.
So is this medfly? It's a dry season.
Predominantly, yes. Yes. We used to see about 10 years ago. We used to see between February and July. we used to have the most incidences, which was the dry season.
Yes.
But because of climate change and everything, things have, been,
Things have
I guess,
changed.
out of whack.
Yes.
Really, so we found medflies all the way up to November now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because there's periods of dry season that before used to be rainy season, now it's more dry. And so from February to November, we can say we are at the risk of these flies being
Which gives you
introduced.
3 months afterwards, because December, January, February, you're right back into it.
Right back into it.
Wow.
Yes, and like I say, it's an expensive program, but since 1987, I think we've done a pretty decent job in
course.
ensuring that the medfly hasn't become established in Belize.
Wow.
So the voluntary quarantine phase, which
Yes.
is don't move your fruit, just eat it where you are,
Right.
is where we're at. One of the things that keeps on sticking on my mind is the fruit stalls that are along the Hummingbird Highway. I love it because you could get fresh fruit as you drive along, whether
Yes.
you're coming in, whether you're
Right,
going
yeah.
into the south or coming up to the city.
Yeah.
What type of, if I have a lot of mangoes in Hopkins, if I go on the roadside, I can sell it. It can come to Belize City.
Right, and that's the reason why we moved very quickly to remove the fruits from the area where the medfly was detected.
Yeah.
Like I say, if people do move fruits, it's from outside of this small area, and with the trapping that we have, we will know more or less. Now, if we continue to find a lot of flies in the village, then we'll have to
Quarantine the village.
Yeah.
the village, and we might even consider quarantining the entire south like we did in 2013.
Yeah. And what did that mean? Tell me.
Well, it would entail, the entire thing, budget preparation, everything, and it costs like approximately 200,000 for the first 3 months.
Wow.
And I have to mobilize my staff from the borders. It's a very expensive venture, and we have to quarantine the entire area, all the outlets, the
Yeah.
roads, and it's 24/7. We get support from other agencies like the police to man the checkpoints, and all confiscated fruits destroyed.
Yeah.
So the entire area then no fruit can be moved out.
Wow.
And the plant health department continues doing the eradication process that you just explained. So we want to avoid all that, to see if we can contain it and eradicate it as it is right now.
Yeah.
Plus, it's an inconvenience for everybody, because even people who are not taking any fruits,
You have to
they
be
have
stopped
to
and checked.
stop, in the line, or if you're traveling in the bus, you have to take out everybody out of the
everything,
bus. So
yeah.
And
apart
search
from
everything.
apart from being extremely expensive, it's very inconvenient. So
Yeah.
we use it as a last resort, but if things get out of hand, then it will be the only option.
Yeah.
But as you said, it's been since 2013 that you've done a
Right,
mandatory
yes,
quarantine,
since 2013.
which means you've been able to remove or the threat of the medfly all subsequent years after that. You got a
Right.
detection and then you cut it. How long do you normally see before you're able to remove the medfly from the country?
Normally, we do chemical control for 6 weeks. If after 6 weeks we don't find any more flies, then we leave the traps for 90 days. And if after 90 days we don't find any more, then we considered it eradicated.
Okay.
And we've done, like I said, we've done a pretty
Decent
decent
job
job,
with it,
in ensuring that whenever we have the detections, they are quickly eradicated.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the message, the core message that I want to, what's the word?
You want to deliver?
Tell the
I want to
people,
deliver
yeah.
today is that the medfly will not move on its own. It's people who move the
Moves it.
medfly.
Yeah.
So please be aware. And a lot of people think that you have to contraband stuff to get it into the country. Check with BAHA. A lot of times you can get an import permit to import fresh fruits or
Easy.
vegetables.
Yeah.
So check with us. There's a legal way of doing these things. And because our borders are so wide open, it's difficult for us to deal with all the contraband.
Yeah.
But again, the message that I want to deliver, what BAHA wants to deliver, is please refrain from bringing stuff illegally. There's a
Any
legal
fresh fruit.
any fresh fruits,
And do it the right way.
and do it the right way. There's a legal way to do it.
So for families to do their, can people do their own detection? Like you go to your tree, you monitor how things are, but you wouldn't advise the folks to check your traps though.
Right? No. Right? Because they wouldn't be, and there's a lot of fruit flies that we have in Belize that are not of quarantine importance or even of economic importance. So if you eat a mango and you find a larvae in there, a worm in there, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a medfly. there's a lot of fruit flies here in Belize.
Especially
So
on guava.
I would leave checking the traps to BAHA for the people who are trained to do it.
So while we're in the dry season, we know that the Medfly is the topic. But are there any other things that are hazardous to us that we could detect around this time of the year?
How much time do we have?
Just a few.
Yeah, no.
We're like the healthy child in middle of an infestation.
Yeah.
There's so many.
There's a lot of pests that are in the region that we do not have, and this is why it's important. Quarantine does an excellent job in ensuring that they man the legal points. There are other fruit flies that we do not have in Belize, such as Bactrocera, that are present in the U.S. sometimes, or flights coming in from Asia. As our colleagues in a previous show had mentioned, that the world is so connected that within a couple of hours a person can
bring something from
infested from Asia into Belize.
Yes. Yeah.
And so we always have our guard, maintain our guard.
Yeah.
We have some very, very serious pests out there. For example, there's a fungus that affects bananas, which is Fusarium oxysporum. This is in Asian countries, and movement of people. 24 hours you can be there and back in Belize.
Belize, yes.
This pest ever comes in, it can wipe the entire banana industry within a short period of time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just to give you an example. Then we have this African swine fever that can move into Belize quickly through a ham, a sandwich.
Yeah.
And comes into
Wipe out
Belize.
everything.
Yeah.
That's it.
Even canned meat, they were telling us
Yes,
before.
exactly.
It doesn't,
We have pests and disease, even zoonotic diseases that can come and affect humans. Yes, that's why we also under the food safety department, when they issue a permit, they have done a risk analysis, just like the plant health department and animal health department. So they give you the conditions. And we at the borders, the quarantine department is like the enforcement arm of BAHA, ensuring that they comply with the requirements stipulated on the import permit. That's why it's important that people know that they need to get a permit so they can comply prior importing. And when you arrive at the border, you don't have any problem.
Yeah.
So once you're compliant,
Everything is good.
yes, we do the visual inspection and whatever we have to do to allow this to come in. But it's important that people know that BAHA is there to safeguard agricultural and human health.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because I think what is a very important message coming out is why you must disclose what you're bringing into the country, because you may not have a commercial purpose in mind, but just taking it to your home, your farm, or whatever, it has a far larger implication if it hasn't been checked by BAHA.
Exactly.
And for example, for Medfly, all it takes is one infested fruit. That's all it takes. Yeah.
Wow.
All right, gentlemen. Well, I think we hope that people have heard your warning. It's at a voluntary phase, which means don't take your fruit out of these affected areas.
Right.
And be on the lookout for any fruits that have worms that may be medfly.
Yeah. And to allow our officers to go into the area and do our job unimpeded. Before we leave, can I just say that while we are the face of the program and we appear on the media, it's the guys out in the field who are in the trenches and in this heat, and they are checking the traps every week. They are working weekends to do fruit stripping, and so they're the real force behind this program. They're the reason why this program has worked so well. And
how big is your team?
We have 6. We have a coordinator and 5 technicians who do the entire country. Yeah.
5 technicians.
Very small team.
It is a very small team, but sometimes it's easier because everybody is able to work together.
Yeah.
So and last before I leave, the United States Department of Agriculture has assisted us tremendously, and so we want to thank them for the financial assistance and all the other partners in development, such as OIRSA, the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Finance from Belize, who has helped us.
Well, we wish you the best of luck. We hope people have heard very clearly why they have a role to play as well, and that we can be sure to eradicate the medfly sooner rather than later.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Cornelia Markfield to talk about foods that can cleanse your body. So stay tuned.